So welcome in, Kaylee.
Hi.
We appreciate you joining us today. One of the reasons I asked Kaylee to join us is because several of you have a print background and have also expressed interest in doing video. And of course, as we've said a number of times in our meetings, really now you have to be able to do it all. You have to be able to write for digital, you have to be able to write in AP, text-based style, you have to be able to do social, and you have to be able to do audio. And so Kaylee has a really interesting background in that she was in school and she interned at a TV station. But then when she graduated, the full-time job she was able to get after amassing some experience was at a newspaper. And so she did that for a while and then broke into television. So she has both print and television experience, and she's only in her second full-time job, right, Kaylee? Is that correct? And
Yeah.
she's only a couple of years out of school, so she's super close in time frame, and it's all fresh to where you guys are now in terms of breaking in. And so I thought, you could really, all of our interns could really pick your brain and figure out like what's the secret sauce for breaking in, and then when you make a decision to transition, like what was going through your head. So before we get rolling, just want to say thanks for joining us, Kaylee. We really appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So before we dig deep and then I'll open it up for questions as well, tell us a little bit, give us the 30-second Cliff Notes version of like, who are you, where are you now, and your journey for the last several years.
Yeah, so I'm just going to preface really quick by saying that I'm home right now, obviously, and my Wi-Fi is terrible. So if it cuts out at any second, just bear with me and it'll reconnect at some
Sure
point.
thing.
So I apologize in advance for that. But yeah, so I graduated college. I went to Roger Williams University in Rhode Island. I graduated in 2019, which is so weird. And then right from there, I did a couple internships in college at like local TV stations, at a magazine, and then also at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. And then from college, I went on to be a newspaper reporter at a local family-owned paper in Connecticut. And I covered a town and a school system. And I was also like a night cops breaking news reporter too. And then after that, I went to where I am now, and I'm a TV reporter at a CBS, ABC, and Fox station in Springfield, Mass. And yeah, before I became a reporter at the station where I am now, my first few months, I was a digital content producer. That's how I started. And that was like a lot of web work, writing articles for the website, kind of some assignment desk work too. I kind of did a lot of stuff there. And then I ended up switching over to, I'm an MMJ. So I kind of run my own live shots, and I shoot and edit all my own stuff. And yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe I might dip back into the digital world next. So we'll see where the wind blows me. But yeah.
Awesome stuff. Wow, you've done a lot and got to do a lot in just a short 2 years since graduating. So let's hit the rewind button if you don't mind, and let's talk a little bit about, you're in your senior year and you've had a couple of internships by that point. And so at that point in time, what are you shooting for? What kind of gig are you trying to land, and why?
I I don't think I really had any idea what I wanted to do when I was a senior. I had done mostly print work in college up until I think my senior year is when I started taking a little bit of dip into like a broadcast life. So when I was job searching, and I think I started searching for jobs in like March, so like right around now-ish, before I graduated in May, and I applied to like 20 a day. I mean, I applied to hundreds and hundreds of jobs before graduation. I think I heard back from like 4 of them. So if you have started yet and you're job searching and job applying and you don't hear back from anybody, don't be discouraged, because I don't think I heard back from like 80% of the jobs that I'd applied to when I was starting. So but I knew that I wanted to be a storyteller of some sort, and I was hoping that it would be in a digital sense, and I would have video work because that was what I wanted to do. But I wasn't having a ton of options with that. When I graduated, I had 2 options. I could either go 2 offers from 2 places. I could go and be the reporter at the paper that I ended up taking. And I also had a job as a part-time assignment desk editor at a TV station in Connecticut, and which is a huge market. It's like in top 50, and could have been a good move too. Honestly, either option was really great. I just knew that I needed to be full-time just for financial purposes, and I wanted to be the one that was doing the storytelling. So I ended up taking the job at the paper, which ended up being really great. I think I learned more about
had a little drop off in audio there. So Kaylee, if you can hear us and you're aware, your video's frozen and we can't really hear you right now. So we're treading water, hopefully till you can rejoin us. So yeah, so I guess while we're treading water, waiting for Kaylee to come back, then listen to what she just said. You know, I know I sound like a broken record to you guys, but I suggested you apply to at least 100 jobs before the end of March. And so she said she applied to several hundred jobs and got 2 offers. One is an assignment desk person in a larger market. One is a reporter and photographer at a local newspaper. So that's a couple hundred jobs. She said she didn't hear back from 80% of those jobs, and then finally took the offer at the newspaper. Kaylee, we don't see your picture, but we do see you're muted now. So if you are back on and want to just do audio, then please just do audio. Let's try it that way and see if we can help with the bandwidth there and still hear from you a little bit more about your journey. So if you can hear us, Kaylee, unmute and proceed. Okay, I'm going to pull something else up here right now. There you go.
Sorry
okay.
about that.
No worries. We had you up until you said you took the job at the newspaper. So continue from there.
Okay. I think it's my computer. I don't even know if it's my Wi-Fi. I have to figure that out. Anyway, so I took the job at the paper, and I learned a lot of reporting skills there that I have less experience of in broadcast, just because I think the details are you have more room to tell more of the story, whereas in TV you're confined to a certain time slot of TV. So a little bit different there, but yeah, so I did that for almost a year. I think it was about 10 months. And then I was really aching to get back into video. So I didn't really have a ton of opportunities to do a lot of video and multimedia work there. And then when I moved over to TV, there were definitely elements of print that I was missing, but I have a lot more of a grasp on the multimedia world, which really the industry is taking that huge digital shift right now anyway. So this is definitely putting me more forward in that.
So I like that. So before we move on from that first job, since there are several folks on this call that are seniors and thinking about taking jobs at newspapers or considering that, let's talk a little bit about that experience and let's fill in some of those details. What was it like working in that newsroom in terms of, did you have it? And I don't want to put words in your mouth and I don't want to assume things, but we all hear these stories of papers being in financial trouble. And so was it a situation where was the paper properly funded? Were you worried about expense issues and the viability of that enterprise? And what were any of the surprises or lessons there about, like, oh, I thought I was going to be doing this, but really what I'm doing is this? Is it maybe 2 or 3 things in particular that if someone walked into that job, this is what you were met with and what you got to do?
Yeah, so couple things with that. So it was owned, like it's a family owned paper. I think it's like the second largest paper in the state, but it's family owned. So it wasn't owned by like a large corporation. So that
Gotcha.
definitely played into the finances that I'm sure was a struggle for everybody. I felt pretty safe and secure there. They definitely really cared about their employees. So I wasn't ever really nervous about suddenly losing my job. I'm sure it could have happened, but everybody there felt pretty secure, which is a good feeling to have, especially in journalism. But yeah, I mean, our staff was small. I know they told a lot of stories about how they had hundreds of people in the newsroom at a time, because it's in a huge, giant building that was like an old, I think a train station, giant building, and that our newsroom was enormous, but there were so many empty desks just because we had like 30% of the staff that they had at some point. So that's a little tougher too when you're in a setting with a smaller team. You obviously have to take on a lot more responsibility, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I got to do tell so many different kinds of stories. So it definitely, I mean, it was pretty cool that it wasn't confined to like the one thing that I was like kind of assigned to do. But yeah, what was the second half of that question?
Were there any surprises, like when you thought, like, what's it going to be like working in a newspaper, and you walked in and thought, okay, well, that's the same, but these 2 things are different? Were there any surprises there?
I think the only thing that I wasn't totally prepared for is I worked on a team with that was a lot just people that were older than I was. I was so used to working with like 20 somethings in a college newsroom setting on my college paper that when I went to the paper and it was just people who had been in the industry for a lot longer and maybe expected that I don't know. I think that's just my style of how I had learned journalism might have been different from somebody who has been there for 40 years, which is totally understandable. But when I went into the station, I realized like how many more people just more fresh, fresh out of college and just more like with that more progressive, we have to take the shift with the rest of the industry sort of thinking. I think that's the only thing that I was like, oh, I forgot that I'm not working with all of my friends and the newsroom. So that was a little bit different, but they had so much experience and they were so seasoned that it ultimately just made my skills so much stronger because I had so many people to learn from.
Yeah, that's great. Before we move on from the newspaper, I know there are a couple of people here that have distinct interests in newspaper and print. And if you want to unmute and ask any questions, go ahead and do that now while we're right in the middle of talking about Kaylee's experience at the newspaper. Okay, nobody asking questions immediately. So so you're there 10 months and you miss doing video and you say, okay, time to move on and get some video experience. So tell me a little bit about, to all of us about, you make the decision and then what do you do and how do you change your job search in any way from when you were in college to when you're now in your first job?
Yes, in terms of the job search, that's the only time I had ever done job searching is when I graduated college. And like I said, I applied to so many and I heard back from so few of them. So my experience in the interview process and how to write a cover letter and what my resume should look like was low. So when I went to start applying to jobs that were that just had a different set of what they were looking for in terms of the job, I had minimal experience. I had honestly no experience in broadcast except what I did in college. And I was coming from print, and which is again a totally different thing from writing for web and writing for broadcast. So I wung it. I think the best advice I would have if you're switching not industries, but like switching from print to broadcast is just find a way to make connections with people. I think the one thing I should have done that I didn't do is reach out to reporters that already worked there just to get a feel of like what that life was like. I was fortunate enough to know that I knew somebody who had worked at the station I worked at previously, which she helped me get in touch with the right people. But especially once I start really looking for jobs again at some point, your connections are everything in this industry. That the more people you know, the more people that they can connect you to. And it's a competitive world, obviously, as we know. So the more people you know that can help you get to where you need to go, I think is the best thing that has gotten me to where I am so far.
Sounds good. So you arrive at your television station and you begin to do your work there. I'll ask the same question I asked you about the newspaper. What were the big surprises, about, okay, now this is what I'm doing now. This is different. This is what I need to do.
Well, what was odd about when I started at this station was that I started working there as the pandemic began. So I feel like my answer to this question will not be the correct answer for other times in life because I don't even really know what it's like to work at a station not in a pandemic because I started 1 year ago yesterday, which is crazy.
Congrats, that's wild.
And so it was a little weird. So I got there and most of the reporters weren't even allowed in the building for social distancing purposes. So there was a good, I would say like 4 months before I really saw and met in person half of the people that I was working with, which was crazy. In terms of surprises, I think the way that video first, obviously, because it's in broadcast versus print, that my tasks were really centered around getting on camera interviews. I was used to a phone call would be enough, or even an email would be enough for a story at sometimes, but that's not the case here. And the phone calls are not ideal. And even right now we're lucky and Zoom calls make things a lot easier, but yeah, that was a little bit of a change in pace, especially when I was on the content producing side and I had to get all of our stories on the web, and I would be coordinating, trying to set up interviews for some of the reporters. And they were like, "Oh, I can call you really quick." And I'm like, nah, you have to make time for a Zoom call, or can we meet you somewhere? So setting up on-camera interviews is a little bit harder. Sometimes people are a little bit more reluctant to hop on camera versus sending you an email or calling you on the phone. So that was a little bit of a change I had to switch over to, was thinking video first, because I had never had to think visually first in the past. But I prefer it at this point. It's a cool thing. I'm a visual learner and a visual person, so it ended up going well for me. But that was a shift I had to switch to.
A lot to handle at coming in at the same time with the pandemic and all too. Wow.
Yeah.
So how have things changed? Are things starting to get a little better, and you're a little bit freer to do some things and connect with people now a year later?
Yeah, when I started, it's weird to think about now, but a lot of my stories, I didn't have to wear a mask on camera if I wasn't around people, if I was in a setting where I was completely alone. But now there's like state laws that I have to be masked all the time, which is fine. It's been great in the cold months, keeping me warm in the early morning hours. We have, and again, these are not things that like I was used to before, but we have like socially distant like microphone sticks, or typically like you would maybe like hold the microphone up to the people that you're interviewing. I saw that a little bit when I started. Reporters were still kind of doing that, but that became like no longer allowed for a while. And we had like these 6-foot poles we would hold up for a while, which were really heavy and awkward when you were like trying to man the camera, ask the questions, hold this 6-foot pole. That was kind of like a circus act. We now have these like just mic stands that we just set 6 feet away, and that's been a little bit better. But people are getting a little bit more lax with mask wearing, because many people are getting vaccinated. So it's been nice to see people's whole faces again. So that's shifting a little bit. I think as the vaccines are ramping up, it's a little bit, people are less scared to come near you and to like do those in-person interviews. And I was really Zoom heavy for a really long time because people were like, I don't meet people in person anymore. And that's kind of changing a little bit. So that's been really nice.
That's great. So you transitioned from the newspaper to your television station. Tell me a little bit about if there are any skills that you bulked up on and improved as a newspaper reporter, which then became helpful when you moved into television and gave you an edge or gave you more confidence or capability.
Yeah, so I was a reporter before I went to the station, and I started as a content producer. And a lot of times people that start as a content producer don't necessarily come in with any reporting experience. So when we had breaking news and I had to get something online and send our like little app phone push alerts, I had journalism skills and instincts about how to get the story and how to form the story and how to tell the story that saved me a lot of time on training too when I started, because I just knew how to do it. And when I was a late night cops breaking news reporter at the paper, I had to know what it was like to go to a fire or a shooting or a car fire accident, something, and find people, get something, and like get it back to the newsroom as soon as possible so that our viewers, readers, and consumers had it. So when I started reporting and they put me on a breaking news situation, I was a little bit less nervous because I had some breaking news experience before. So that gave me that. I guess I could have also had that experience if I went from TV to TV, but the paper was a little bit, I think, less stressful because I didn't have to get something on camera, and I just had to go look around, jot some notes down, maybe grab a quote from somebody that was standing on the street, standing by, maybe snap a picture if we had that kind of time and it wasn't too late to meet our 10 p.m. deadline. And then I got in my car and I went back and I wrote something up, and then the night was over. So it was a little bit of like more of a toe dip in the water versus when I have like a fire I cover at the station. It's a lot more, and you have to get sound immediately. See if there's a firefighter available, and like the sound heavy is very important, and obviously strong visual so people know what in the world you're talking about is important too. So you have more things I think to think about when heading to a breaking news situation in TV, but I had skills already about how to handle a breaking news situation coming from the paper to TV.
Tell me a little bit about, in both instances, anything you were able to bulk up on or master when it comes to working a beat and developing sources. How important is that, and how has your confidence and ability grown in respect to that?
I love beat reporting, and I don't have that now. Now I'm general assignment and just whatever is available. But when I was at the paper, I covered 2 towns in Connecticut. So like their local politics, businesses, whatever happened, anything that happened in those 2 towns, and also the school system that served those 2 towns. And that made finding a story sometimes easier and sometimes harder, because they were small Connecticut towns and sometimes nothing goes on in those towns. But the people that want to know about what's going on in their town, like, I mean, I knew everybody that lived in the towns. I was in with everybody in town hall, the first selectman, which is like, the person that runs the town, finance department, school superintendent, John Smith, who owns the coffee shop down the street, just knew everybody. So it made finding stories a lot easier, because people that live in those towns really care and want to know about what's going on in those towns. And I was the only one that was telling those stories. So that made finding sources easy, just because that I was the only one, and that was convenient. But it's a little bit harder in TV. I have formulated stories with community members, and we already had existing relationships with state officials and things like that. And while it's nice to just be able to tell stories on anything, beat reporting is cool, because you really hone in on, like, I became very much an expert on that school system's inner workings, and how the classes went, and how local politics went in this town, and it makes storytelling a little bit easier, just because it's like you're telling a story on the community you live in. Like, it's like, it was just, I don't know. I personally, I kind of miss beat reporting a lot. And if I ever head back into print or in a form of journalism where I can start writing again, it would be cool to just like find a niche of the one thing that I would just want to talk about forever, which would be cool. But if you're not into that thing, like general assignment reporting is awesome too, because you get a taste of everything: breaking news, politics, social features, education, crime, literally everything. So that's what's been cool about that too.
That's cool. So tell us a little bit about the social aspect of both jobs. How important was posting on social to the newspaper? How important is it at the television station, and how do you do it in both those realms?
Posting on social media at the paper was not nearly as important as it is in my experience, and as it is in TV. We're very like, digital means social, and as soon as something is ready, put it online and then post it on our social media, on our Facebook and Twitter pages. I think we have an Instagram page too, which is like, our Facebook and Twitter pages are tied together. But when I was at the paper, I use my Twitter account like religiously, and every time I have a story or something's happening, I go there. I'm trying to do better about that on Instagram and Facebook too, because I know a lot of our viewers hop on Facebook. But yeah, it's a lot more important now. I mean, we have social posts at the station every half an hour. We're all told to keep up with social media and engage with people on social media, which is important and the correct move for sure. I just didn't really have that at the paper, which was another reason why I wanted to move into the more multimedia TV realm, is because it's a lot easier to find sources and connect with people and find stories. I found so many stories on Facebook and social media. So I use it way more now, and I'm trying to be better at it. And yeah, highly recommend to get all your professional socials in order before/while you're job hunting, so that you can show them that, like, I already have a presence, people are paying attention and know who I am. And yeah.
Great, makes sense. Any questions from interns at this point, really, about anything that Kaylee's talked about so far, or anything that's on your mind? Ryan, you raising your hand, go ahead.
Hey, Kaylee, what's going on? I'm just curious, more so because of your transition from print to television, is why did you leave? And what made you want to move on to go to a television station instead?
Yeah, I've moved from print to TV mainly for the reason I was talking about before, was just because I really was video heavy at the end of my senior year in college, and that's really what I just found an interest in. So when I wasn't really having as much, I had some opportunity. Like, I was probably the only person at the paper that was trying to like grab a video if I was at a breaking news scene, or stitching, clips together at some event I went to or something. And when I started being able to do that towards the end of my time there, I realized how much more I wanted to do that, just because I am a visual person and I like to see what I'm reading about or what I'm talking about, and just gives me a better understanding to know what it is happening. So yeah, that's the reason I made that shift, was just because I'm a visual person. And yeah.
Makes sense. So what was the I don't know if we plumbed this earlier on, but what was one of the biggest surprises or in the transition from, you started out as a digital producer and then you moved on in front of the camera and started doing MMJ work. So was there any big epiphany or surprise there when you made that transition in-house?
I don't know. I think the only difference in the job was that people knew that it was me that was telling the story. Once I hopped on camera, people started to, put a face to the name at the top of the, in the byline.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing a lot of like if we had a breaking news situation or if we got a press release that wasn't necessarily story worthy, but could have done well on social media, for example, that I would take that and like turn that into an article. So I was getting like the reporting thing kind of going. And then once I hopped on camera, I was a little bit more stressed out all the time, just because like they're going to associate that story to you and who you are. But I think the transition was pretty smooth just because I had some reporting experience already. I was really nervous at the beginning in terms of being on camera, especially when I started being live for the first time. That was really scary. But no, I think that transition was pretty smooth.
So I explained to a lot of all the folks here on the call and also in many of the presentations I make that, as you experienced, breaking in is really important. I mean, getting your foot in the door somewhere. And so, maybe your experience in the TV station would be illustrative of somebody coming in one job and then, but as a way to get to another job. So how did you navigate and make it known to supervisors, hey, if that job ever comes open, I'd like to do that. And how did you really maximize your, what you did in the newsroom so they knew you were ready and capable to do that? And so you got tapped to move up when it was available.
I actually applied to the station I work at now for a reporter job, is like what I aimed for. They had already filled the position, but during kind of the process before I did an interview, they said that they had that digital content producer job open and that it could be fused with this sort of like hybrid job where I would do my digital content job, but then also like have little opportunities to do some MMJ stuff. So that I was like, okay, sign me up. I was really excited that it's only 20 minutes from where I live and it was really close to home. And I was happy that I could stay in New England. So that kind of was like how they just kind of like offered this like possibility, a hybrid thing, which is like super common now over the last year. They've like kind of makeshifted these other hybrid roles with like other producers and other photogs and sort of things like that. So they kind of just said we could create this sort of a thing. And then after time, when the position becomes available, you could potentially move into a full-time reporter role. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, that makes sense, right? So let's talk about that moving in front of the lens thing and the live shot thing. So what did you do to get ready? I mean, did you stand in front of a mirror and practice, live shots before you had an opportunity to live shots, or how did you rep that so you felt good about being able to do it when the time came?
I think I put together like 3 packages in college, and then a year later I started working at the station, and then I did a couple practice packages just so that I could show our news director that I was capable of putting them together.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back at them now, I am shocked at how horrible that they all were. I just did a lot of practice ones, and I would just watch. I think one of the techniques of how I like kind of developed my news voice is watching other reporters and anchors at our station, just like how they articulated things and just their delivery in general. My first live shot came out of nowhere and I had no preparation for it and it just happened. So I won that 100%. And it was okay. The first one, I think I was so nervous that I was just like, and I just, said the words I had written in my script and hoped all went well. And luckily it did. I'm really comfortable at being live now. It's no big, after a while, it's just like, it's kind of, it's like riding a bike. It's just easy after some points, I think. But at the beginning, I was so deathly afraid and I just wung it until I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Exposure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes and what you have to know and be able to do when it comes to doing a live shot. I mean, you you have to set up your live shot. Do y'all use TVU or live view, or what do y'all use for your live sources?
Yeah, we have a live view system.
Okay.
My first live shot, I was really fortunate and I had a photog with me because I didn't know how to use the live view yet.
Yeah.
And then the role that I'm in now is we have a 4 hours worth of a morning show in the morning from 5 to 9. So I kind of photog for another reporter sometimes, and then other times we split, and then I run my own live shots. So I have to get to work really early, grab all the gear, grab the live view, make sure I have 1,000 batteries because they die really fast, especially in the cold. And then head to the place and set everything up, make sure everything works. Sometimes got to troubleshoot the live views because they just malfunction and don't connect. So those moments are a little bit stressful, especially when you're nearing your live shot. And then, yeah, I just kind of stand and go and hope all goes well in that situation. But when I started MMJing / doing live shots,
Yeah, you're dropping out a little bit there again. Kaylee, I have a little bit of dropout from you. So what she's talking about, a live view unit. How many of you have bonded cellular live view or TVU units? And Ryan, you do at Syracuse. Jenna, okay, at Syracuse. So what they are, they're little backpacks, and it's like 4 cell phone units bonded into a little backpack, and then you turn it on and it transmits your live signal, and you're able to do that. So Kaylee, and you're like, how did they go about training you? Did a photog take you and show you the live view and say, here's how you turn it on and here's how you plug it in? Or how'd that work? How'd that training process go to learn that kind of highly technical stuff?
Yeah, I had 1 day of training with all of our equipment, and it's luckily a pretty easy system. You just turn it on and then plug it. There's like a cable that runs from the live view that you plug into the camera, and then just click start and hope that it turns on. It's like, it's pretty foolproof unless it like refuses to connect, and then you have to like restart it and just mess with it, sort of press buttons around just until it finally connects. But yeah, I had 1 day of training, and then they were like, you got this, good luck. And then off I went. And luckily it went okay because they're not super hard to use, but I was nervous for a while, but just to troubleshoot specifically, because I had no idea how to troubleshoot, because none of those problems came up during the training that I had. So that's definitely a learn by experience sort of situation. But yeah, training wasn't too bad because they're pretty simple.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people are initially surprised by that, because when you think about doing a live shot, you don't realize, okay, I have my camera, my tripod, my microphones, my lights, my extra stands for microphones for interviewing people, my live view unit, and all that stuff. That's a lot. And my phone, I'm working my phone, my laptop. You got a lot of stuff you got to know how to use. So was any part of that mix intimidating to you at all in terms of mastering that and really being comfortable with it?
Yes. Yep. I have forgotten tripods. I would head to a live shot and just completely didn't have a tripod with me, and had to turn around to go get one. I have had batteries that I thought were charged that ended up being dead when I got to where my live shot was happening, and I just had to hope that it would hold on long enough for one shot that I could just charge it in between shots. Live view batteries, I have forgotten. It happens, but I've had to make shift situations sometimes and just like charge things in between live shots. So yes, I was very nervous at the beginning about forgetting things, and I don't really forget things now. I have learned not to do any of that ever again. But yeah, I was definitely nervous at the beginning, and now I have like a checklist before I leave the station that I have batteries, tripods, extra batteries, chargers, tripods, cameras, microphones, extra cables, everything, so that we don't run into those problems, because it just sets the whole day back, especially for live shots, or if you're gathering a package and you have to move an interview forward a half an hour because you have to go all the way back to the station and grab an SD card that you forgot, and that's the worst. I've done that before, and it's just, once you do it once, you never do it again.
Kimberly, you had a question. Why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Oh, I just had a question because I don't know which one is better, because like sometimes like I like print because I feel like everyone wants to do TV, so that would be like an easier way to get into the door. But for you, which one did you like better, print or television?
I think I'll always have like a part of my soul dedicated to print, just because I was able to put more details into stories where I now have 90 seconds to say what I have discovered over the 8 hours prior to that. So that's tough. It has taught me how to be more concise in my storytelling and really only include like the important details that people need to know. But I kind of miss print in the sense that like I had way more room to tell more of the story that I want to be able to tell. But there are times in TV where my video package might be short, but I can go back online and like add some of the content that I wasn't able to add into the video into the web article. So that is helpful too.
Yeah, that's what my biggest thing is, just trying to include everything, because I have a trouble of like selecting which part's important or which one's not. Like, that's
Yeah, I have been like that since I was in college, where I just held on to all the information and I refused to cut anything out of it. Anytime when I was at the paper and I had an editor be like, okay, we have to cut this in half because we just don't have room for it, I would like panic and be like, I can't take anything out of it. So that is a skill that I'm still working on learning. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, the biggest difference between the two.
okay. That's good to know.
So usually when we have a guest, I borrow Jared's question, which is if you could talk to Kaylee of 2.5 years ago, and you could give her 2 or 3 pieces of advice, what would be the 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give the Kaylee of 2 or 2.5 years ago?
Oh, that's a great question. I think about that a lot, actually. I think I would tell her to stress less, especially in the job application process. Our rejections are the worst, and not hearing back is almost worse than that. So not to, it's not personal. There's so many, especially some of like those higher jobs, they get hundreds and hundreds of applications. So it's not a personal thing. So I would say stress less, and also just enjoy like where you're at, because I miss college so immensely. And while I like love, being just in the industry every day, obviously like learning with like your friends and your peers and like learning together is a whole different thing. But I would say, especially as you leave college and you get into your first job and you're just like, okay, but like, where am I going to go next? What job am I going to do next? Do I want to stay in print? Do I want to stay in broadcast? Do I want to leave, and do something local? Do I want to do something national? Whatever, like, you're in the moment and you're keep thinking about like, what am I going to do next? I would say do less of that, just because your energy should just be focused on like what you can learn today and how you can apply it to what you do tomorrow. And so I would say, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. It's just focus on where you're at, and you're going to get to where you need to be. The universe will place you where you want / supposed to be, as long as you're doing what you have to be doing to work to get there.
Good stuff. Any other questions right now? I'm curious, both at the newspaper and at your current role, your role as a digital producer and as an MMJ, how much conversation and attention in each one of those roles and experiences has been placed on the metrics? In other words, circulation, page views, social media metrics, and then television ratings. How much conversation is going on about that in those various roles, and were you exposed to? And was it how much of a role did that play in daily life and activity and awareness and in each of the roles that you've had?
Yeah, when I was I think it's a pretty big conversation everywhere, just so like, especially in local news specifically, is you're tailoring to the local community and how you're going to give them the information that they want to hear, because it's possible that a community in Massachusetts might care less about something that a community on the other side of the country, just because local issues are local issues. Like local politics in Connecticut, in a small town of Connecticut, odds are a community in Colorado might not care as much about what's going on like within like a town government. But the discussion of circulation and ratings is still like a huge thing, because we're a business and we're creating something that we want people to continue to watch, to read, to click on, to pay attention to. So when I was at the paper, I feel like I was a little on the newer side, so like I didn't really hear as much about it, but I know that there were conversations about like, okay, like we get emails and phone calls and physical letters sometimes just from people that were reading the paper about what they wanted to hear more about or what they wanted to see in the paper. And then you must go forth and produce those things because they are the ones that are going to keep your paper, business, whatever, afloat and alive, especially with the financial struggles that obviously we know journalism newsrooms across the country face. And then in the station, we talk a lot about like how are we, branding our content so that it caters to what they want. How much time are we going to dedicate to local crime, or how much time are we going to dedicate to weather based on like what our viewers pay attention to the most and what they want to hear / read / watch about. And we talk a lot about that, especially on social media. Like, oh, we should post this on social media. I think this will engage a lot of people and we'll get a lot of, feedback and comments and, whatever from people. And that's like a daily conversation. Like, okay, we're picking our stories for the day. What are people going to care about? It's really all about like making sure you're doing the work that people are going to want to know and what they want to hear, because it's really about them and less about us. So yeah, daily conversation for sure.
Makes sense. We've had a number of guest speakers, and you talked a little bit about it earlier in your chat, and I want to zero in on it now. The idea of coming up with story ideas and then pitching them in editorial meetings. Every station and every newspaper is different. How does the pitch process and how do the editorial meetings work at your station? And how important is it for you to be bringing ideas that can turn today to that meeting in the morning?
So I think coming up with your own story ideas is it's my preference to like come in and say, this is the story I've sometimes even already started working on. Here's the plan. Here's who I'm going to talk to. And I just feel more stable and more like I have control of the situation. Whereas times, especially because this a little different, because the shift that I work is I go through and we like do our morning show, which is like, we report on something that happened the day before, or if there's breaking news. And then I have from like 8:30 to 12 to put a package together. So it's easier for me to come up with my own stories and like work a day ahead so that I can come in and be like, okay, like yesterday morning, I set this up for today, and I can go and do the interview. And then, it's less running around and you meet your deadlines, which is so important. And it's just more productive of your time. But there are plenty of days where like your story falls through and you're like, oh, I have nothing else off the top of my head. And then you got to go and collaborate with the rest of the team and be like, what else? What can we do? And it totally depends on the day. 'Cause sometimes stories just fall through, and that happens sometimes. And then you have to quick think what you're going to do instead. But in terms of like pitching during our morning meeting, we have a huge morning meeting that our morning team isn't really a part of, but for the dayside reporters and dayside producers and all the photogs and editors and teams come together, and everybody like throws out things like, oh, I saw this on Facebook, or I was at the grocery store and I heard somebody talking about this that was happening down the street, or here's a national issue. This is one of my favorite things to do, is like, here's a national issue and here's how we can localize it and how to make it, we've done that. Obviously it's a lot easier to do that during COVID, especially vaccine related. I've done a lot of stories about COVID, and I've just talked to local doctors, and I'm trying to think of a good example. I did a story like a month or two ago about people who suffer, like if it was safe to get the COVID vaccine if you suffer from food allergies, or different kinds of food allergies. So I talked to an issue that affects everybody, and then localized it by talking to a doctor in our area. And also I found somebody who had severe allergies and was like, oh, I'm nervous about getting the vaccine, but I'm going to get it anyway. So those are my favorite ones to do. And that's been a lot easier to do over the last year. Yeah, so it depends on the day, and like if it's crazy in terms of national news, or if there's like we can do like a team coverage thing where we all kind of report on one thing and we just do different angles for it, especially during like the election. Like we did a lot of different local stories, different towns and different stories related to the election. That was a crazy time. Election day is the best day in journalism for sure. If you haven't gone through an election year during journalism, it's the best thing ever. But yeah, it definitely goes by day. But I think having ideas, like I think about it every day, like what stories can I do this week? Like what's happening in the area? I keep up with our like town forums and local pages just to stay in touch with the community.
So, and I want to make sure I capture this correctly. Would you say that your newsroom is more a general assignment newsroom, and it is kind of like the story of the moment, and then you pitch, and then whatever is most attractive, then they assign that, or are there any beats assigned in your newsroom?
Yeah, I would say it's more general assignment based. Like we have one reporter and she's our sports reporter.
Mm-hmm.
So she does all of our sports reporting, and she used to do news, but she's super like sticks to sports now. So she technically has a beat. And then a couple of our reporters will take on like our bigger like investigative pieces. We had one reporter who handled like this one incident, series of incidents at the start of the pandemic at this nursing home in Massachusetts, and she was kind of like our go-to reporter for that. Sometimes it just like happens that way, where like a reporter will like anytime like a situation comes up that's the same and it's a repeated thing, that we have a reporter that covers that, maybe by chance. But no, I would say it's pretty general assignment based in my experience in TV.
And to the extent that you have had experience in that morning meeting, what have you noticed in terms of people who pitch strong ideas? Are they given a green light and they can control their own destiny to go do that story? And is it the stories that are weaker that fall off and then they get told what to do? Is that a fair way to describe that?
I don't know. I think that I am fortunate to work in a newsroom where everybody typically has like a really strong story idea.
That's great.
There are definitely times where I've had a story idea that's like, could be a story, but like, will it be missed without it? Probably not. Like, it's okay. So in that case, like if I pitched a story and I was like, here's my plan for the day, and then our editors and managers are like, but you could maybe do this instead. And I think this is a stronger idea. That happens sometimes. Other times I know I've done stories that aren't super time sensitive, where it's still a good story and we could definitely use it at some point, that I'll just create it and then we'll hold it off until we have space for it. Like sometimes there's days where there's just, it's a heavy news day and it's like something crazy in politics. And we also had like 6 huge fires and the deadly something down the street and big news in terms of vaccines. And it all happens in one day. And we, only have so many reporters. So we have to stack that and cover that appropriately. Sure. And then if I had something in the works that is just maybe more featurey or more like local community, something softer that wasn't super pressing, that we could just save it for a later time. So yeah.
I want to touch on like line producing, the newscast producers. Have you been exposed to any of that in terms of training? And like what's your experience with the rundown? Like what do y'all use? ENPS, or what system do y'all use? And what's your level of knowledge, and how do they handle getting new people used to using that?
We use iNews, and
okay.
I don't use it much now as a reporter, partially because we have like good social distancing where I don't really come into the building and I just really work out of the car and like from the field most of the time. But when I was on the desk, I had iNews open all day. And in terms of like producing our shows, I have no hand in that, but I have a lot of my friends are producers, and I can't imagine the stress that they go through sometimes when breaking news happens and they have to get that in. And it makes to the show, and I'm just kind of mind-boggled about how wonderful our producers are all the time. But yeah, everybody works out of iNews, and we can all see like what's going on at all times, and we can all enter different pieces of information, correct things if there's an error. So that's helpful to just have that one central place to work on. I don't really have any producing experience other than just what I hear from the people that I work with, but they're doing amazing work and I would be stressed out all the time.
Makes sense. Let's talk about a slightly different element of your experience. And because you work a morning show, and some people on this call may be applying for gigs like that, either as, reporters or producers. And, some of those morning shows, somebody produces the morning show and then they get to quote, move up to the 6 or the 11, right? So physically, what's it like? I mean, what's your day like? What time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? Or, like that stuff.
I worked a weird shift when I was on the desk, and when I became an MMJ, I went straight to the morning shift, which means my alarms go off at 2:30, and then I'm at the station at 4, and then I'm done for the day between 12 and 12:30. Our morning shows go from 5 to 9, and whether I'm photogging or I am like the morning reporter or whatever, we have a live shot every half an hour roughly for those 4 hours, which is a lot of talking, which I like wasn't prepared for at the beginning for just how much you have to say. And granted, they're usually just those thoughts, which is just like we read the whole thing live and then maybe we air a sound bite in the middle of it. So it's pretty quick, but like it's every half an hour, and I do that in the morning. And then after that, I have to turn a package and to leave, and then I leave that and they air that in the 4, 5, and the 6 o'clock shows. So it's kind of cool because I get a little bit of time in all of our shows. The morning shows, like it's a different ball game in the morning. Like there's way less people at work, because who really is at work at 4 a.m. except the crucial people to get the morning show done. So I don't really see a ton of people, but I do luckily when I come in the building later. But getting that show together versus getting the later shows together feels a lot different, just because when we're reporting in the morning, it's typically something that is more national or happened the day before that, we're recapping for the people who missed it in our 10, 11 p.m. shows. And then obviously our 4, 5, and 6 o'clock shows completely brand new stuff, but it's cool to be able to just turn a package and then leave it, and then it airs in our evening show. So it's like a really cool mixture of all of it. But yeah, that's the day, give or take something crazy that happens sometimes.
So and I've got people on my morning show, and they have adopted different kinds of strategies. Like my morning producer leaves the morning show and she goes home and immediately goes to sleep, and then wakes up and stays up until the next morning. So how do you manage that, and what works best for you? And do you know of other people on that team, your morning team, how do they handle it?
I think it would be smart of me to go to bed at like 6 o'clock, 6:30 p.m. and get a recommended 8 hours of sleep. I think that would be the logical thing to do, but I just simply don't. I also am in grad school, so 2 nights a week, I have Zoom classes. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays right now, I have a Zoom class from 7 to 10 p.m., which is not ideal when your alarms go off at 2:30 in the morning. So those next days, it just kind of is what it is. I've tried to come home at 12-ish, 1 o'clock, and take a nap for at least 2 or 3 hours, so I have like some sense of sleep. But I just don't. I just want to do, and I have other stuff to do, homework to do, or I just don't want to be asleep in the middle of the day. So I have not found that to be a successful strategy to nap during the day. And I try, I don't know. I don't have any rhyme or reason behind any of it. I just wake up and just do the day, and then worry about recuperating and relaxing over the weekend, I think has been my tactic so far, until I'm in like a school break, and then maybe I'll go to bed earlier. On my off school days, I try and be in bed at like 8, and I'm asleep between 8:30 and 9, which is still not ideal in terms of hours of sleep. I have no advice or recommendations on how to handle sleep in terms of waking up for a morning shift, except that you can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, because I am not a morning person, but I have adapted. And if you're a coffee drinker, great, keep up with that for now during those morning shows. But yeah, I have no schedule, no advice on how to do it properly, because I don't think my methods are ideal.
Okay, that's fair. Everybody's different, because like I said, I've got 5 or 6 people on my morning show, and they all have different strategies on how they handle it.
Yeah, I mean, my co-reporter in the morning, she goes to bed at 6 o'clock and asleep at 6 at the latest, and I can't because of school. I think I maybe would. When I started, I was in a school break. Like when I started this shift, I was in between semesters at school. So I was going to bed at like 7, and that wasn't bad. And then once school kicks in, I don't have a schedule, but I would recommend having one if you are in the morning.
So we're having a more in-depth session on this later on in the internship, but I'll ask you while you're here, because it's fresh for you in 2 instances so far. what do you think the top 3 things that any new employee should do in an MMJ role, let's a reporter role like that, to crush it during the first 90 days of your employment?
I think that you just have to be excited to be there. I mean, there are people that will want to help you do your best, and your writing, especially script writing, like it's only going to get better over time. So you just have to be willing to learn, accept as much feedback as possible. I would when I started, I would have a couple people read my script before I sent it in for final approval from those who approve them. Just like, can I make this better? How can I make it shorter? Because there was a lot of times where my packages should have been 1:30 and they were like 2:20, and that stresses producers out like no other thing. So yeah, I think ask for feedback, ask for just as much of it as you can, because I think that that's only what's going to make you better. And they're the ones that are going to be, approving your scripts every day. And I ask photogs for help on how to better edit and how to get better shots, because as an MMJ, like you're shooting your own video for your stories. So I asked for advice on like, what shot could I maybe have gotten that would have made this part of the story better. So just ask questions. It's your job as a journalist anyways to ask questions. So ask for feedback and just be willing to take it and to adapt and to grow and to learn and to work whatever hours and cover shifts and do whatever you have to do just to be like, I'm here, I want to be here, and I want to get better and I want to grow and, be what the best that I can be and turn the stories that I want to turn and have them be great and have them be amazing and love it while you're at it.
Great. So there's some tools that we use. We talked about it, microphones and tripods and all that kind of stuff. We use our phone, but there's some things that people don't think about. And I'll offer up a few examples and then ask you if you have any recommendations, like once you got on the job and started doing it regularly, like, oh, you know what, that's a cool thing, I should have one of those, y'all should have them. So like I always recommend that everybody has just a box of garbage bags in their car, because you can turn it into a raincoat for your gear, you can turn it into a raincoat for yourself with a hole in the middle and a hole for your arms if you need to. You can throw stuff into it and transport a lot of stuff easily at the last minute. An extra little battery brick where you can recharge your cell phone out in the field, that's a useful thing for people. And so things like that. Is there any little tool that you've gotten since you started when you realized, oh, I'm so glad I discovered this little doodad or whatever, and now I cannot go out in the field without it?
Yeah, definitely a portable phone charger, especially in times of pandemic when you aren't able to go into the building, and especially at a breaking news situation. And especially when we have a show for 4 hours in the morning and I have to be live every half an hour. And there have been times where I've been at like a huge breaking news fire, and where I was allowed to park the car, like the news car, from police and fire officials versus where I had to stand to be able to see the fire behind me, I would not have had enough time to go back and forth between the car. So, which is tough when like your camera batteries die. So, I mean, obviously carry like as many as you can with you, but my portable phone charger made it so like because I have to call in to my IFB ears to hear the producer give me cues and whatever. So that has been a saving grace. Also, I carry a lot of rubber bands now because camera gear and tripods and mic stands and all that stuff can be really finicky sometimes, as is technology. Like real life things fail us too sometimes. And I've been in situations where like my mic's little, like where the mic clips in, just falls off and it can't, like breaks, and I can't get it back on. And I have to, like, I'm not allowed to hold the mic anymore because of social distancing. And like, what do I do? So, rubber bands, they're like kind of sticky and they grip on things. So I would wrap like a bunch of rubber bands and like, or we could have like electrical tape too, and just somehow makeshift bind things together temporarily. So phone charger and weirdly rubber bands have come in handy in the past.
That's great advice. That's a good little nugget to have in the toolkit. We're getting up to our half hour, bottom of the half hour mark here. Does anybody on the call, any of our interns, have any specific questions for Kaylee that you wanted to make sure you got in before we let her go for the day? I don't see anybody raising their hand. Okay, Yara, go ahead.
What kind of advice would you give us in regards to staying optimistic when job searching instead of getting easily discouraged?
Yeah, especially when you're like gonna leave college, and like that's a really scary thing. So if any of you are like really freaking out about leaving college and not being in like that safe space you've been in for so long at any point, it'll be okay. And if in that process, while you're feeling all these emotions about to be graduating, that you're not hearing back from jobs, or you're getting rejected from jobs, everybody does. You're if you got accepted to every single job, you would never learn and grow. And like, sometimes I'll, give feedback and be like, here's what we were kind of missing from your application. And then you can go forth and apply that to your next one. So like I said, I applied to hundreds of jobs when I was about to graduate, and I only heard back from a couple. I think sending follow-up emails is something that I had never done until recently, because sometimes if you send in an application, especially if it goes to like an email specifically, it'll just get lost. Because I get a lot of emails every day, so I can imagine somebody who's like hiring for a job probably gets a lot of emails every day too. So popping in like, hey, hoping or even if like you're just popping in for the first time, you're like, I just want to see if my application made it to you. Here's a little bit about me. I would love an opportunity to tell you why I may be an asset to your team. I think is something I wish I had done when I was job hunting in college, just because it kind of gives hey, here I am, so I don't just get lost in a mass of other applications. But the right one will come. And I think that that's totally true. I applied for a lot of jobs that were like journalism-ish, but weren't like, I wasn't reporting and I was just doing something. I just like wanted a job. So I would apply for something that I knew like would just be a temporary, wouldn't make me as excited about journalism job. And I never heard back from them. And thank God, because I have done okay, I think, since then. So I would just hold on to the fact that the right one's gonna come when it's supposed to come. I hate to like leave things up to the universe, but sometimes that just is what we have to do. And the right one will come, and it could be a time where like you'll get a bunch of at once, and you'll be like interviews for days, and then you'll have a pick, and you'll get to decide like where you want to go forth. So just stay open-minded and just apply, and then apply some more. Even when you're exhausted of hitting that application send button, go and do a couple more before you're done for the day, and just get your resume and your reels and your clips to everybody, especially because that could end up just leading you to making those connections that I was talking about earlier.
Great stuff. Anybody else? Any questions before we let Kaylee go? Kaylee, any final thoughts for folks before we let you take off?
No, I think that, if you guys ever need anything, or if you have questions that you think of later, or you just want to like say, hey, I exist, shoot me an email, follow me on any of the socials, connect me on LinkedIn, whatever. I would love to chat. If you want to do like a one-on-one thing, Zoom call, virtual coffee date, whatever, reach out, because I have found that, especially guest speakers in like some of my grad school classes, that I've reached out to them separately, and they're just like, yeah, like let me know what you're working on, and if I have something that pops up, like I'll let you know. So reach out if you ever need anything. I always have my phone in my hand, so odds are I will answer within a half an hour. So yeah, anytime, reach out for sure.
That's wonderful. Kaylee, thank you so much for being with us today. Be blessed and continued success, and please do keep in touch and let us know how we can help you in the future.
For sure. Thank you guys for having me. This was really fun.
Bye now.
Bye.